Chapter 25. What a Child is Allowed. In the end, stripped of everything else, Ethan took a cold inventory of the only arsenal he had left, and it was a strange and humbling one. The things a 7-year-old is allowed to do. He had no strength. The coal was stalled at the wall, and after the night of the flare he kept it small and silent and did not dare to wield it. He had no authority. He could not command his father, could not forbid the job, could not be believed if he spoke the truth. He had no money he could touch, no body that could stand against a truck, no voice the adult world would heed on a matter of life and death. Against the gray morning bearing down on him, the man inside the boy had almost nothing. But the boy himself had a few things. Small things. The permissions of childhood, the strange license that the world extends to a 7-year-old and to no one else. And Ethan, who had learned to build fortresses out of grains, made himself catalog them, because they were all he had, and he meant to use every one. A child was allowed to be afraid. That was the first and largest of them. An adult who said, "Don't go to work today, I have a bad feeling," was being difficult. A child who woke screaming from a nightmare and would not let go of his father's leg was being a child, and was indulged, and was heeded, a little, in the soft way families heed the fears of the young. Ethan had used this all his life, the fuss, the weather vane, the bad dream, and it had carried him far. But he saw now that he had been spending it carelessly, a little here and a little there, on teapots and toasters and bad men at the door, and that every spending wore it down. A boy who was afraid of everything was afraid of nothing. His fears became weather, background noise, easy to soothe and set aside. The license of childish fear was real, but it was not infinite, and Ethan had been drawing on it for years. A child was allowed to be sick. He had used that too this winter to buy his days, but sickness, leaned on too often, became a pattern, and patterns drew the wrong eyes. A child was allowed to need. To cling, to wake in the night, to refuse to be left, to make of his own small body an anchor that a loving father would not easily tear himself away from. "Don't go, Daddy. Stay. I need you to stay." It was, Ethan understood, the most powerful thing in the whole meager arsenal, the simple, total, unfakeable need of a child for his father. And it was also the most dangerous to spend, because it worked by costing his father something, and could not be spent often before it stopped being need and started being a problem to be managed. And that was the cold heart of the inventory, the thing that turned his planning grim. The arsenal was nearly single-use. Every weapon he had was a weapon of credibility, and credibility was a finite thing that each use spent down. The first time a boy woke screaming and clung to his father's leg and begged him not to go, a loving father might stay, or drive more carefully, or come home early. The third time, the fifth time, the father would simply soothe the boy and go, because the boy was always afraid, the boy always clung, the fear had become weather. Ethan could not stand at the door every morning of the window pouring out terror and need. If he did, he would burn through his credibility in the first week and have nothing left when it counted. The weapons worked precisely because they were rare. Spend them freely and they became noise, which meant he could not guard every morning of the window equally. He had to choose. He had to hold his fire, hoard the screaming, the clinging, the unfakeable need, and spend it not across the whole window but on the one morning that mattered most. The worst morning, the wet dark one that matched the worn photograph, the morning the river most wanted. He had to let his father drive the road on the lesser mornings, swallowing his terror, saving his arsenal, so that on the one morning the whole second life had been building toward, he could unleash everything a child was allowed to do, all at once, undiminished, with all the credibility he had carefully hoarded, and make it count. It was a horrible kind of discipline. It meant watching his father leave for the bad road, morning after morning of the window, and saying nothing, doing nothing, holding the fear clenched silent in his chest, gambling that this morning was not the one. Each time would be its own small agony. But it was the only way the arsenal could work. A child's weapons were precious because they were rare, and Ethan had exactly one full charge of them, and he meant to fire it on the morning that would decide everything. So he made his plan, and it was a plan of terrible patience, which was the only kind he knew how to make. He would watch the window. He would track every morning, the weather, the route, the hour, the tiredness in his father's face, and match each against the photograph in his memory. On the ordinary mornings, the dry ones, the safe-feeling ones, he would let his father go and hold his fire and pray. And he would wait, coiled and silent, hoarding every scream and every clinging hour and every ounce of a child's permitted need. For the one morning the signs all aligned, the wet road, the winter dark, the weight in the air, and on that morning he would stop being patient and become, for one desperate hour, everything a frightened child was allowed to be, and throw it all against the gray morning at once. It was a thin plan. It rested on his reading the right morning, on his arsenal being enough, on a father's love outweighing a winter's wage at the one moment it had to. So much could fail. But it was a plan, and it used what he had, and Ethan Cole had learned long ago that a thin plan held with total commitment was worth more than a thick one held with doubt. He finished the inventory in the dark, set it cold and clear in the careful place, and settled in to wait for the window to open, hoarding his small weapons, watching his father's tired face across the dinner table, and counting, as he had counted since the very first night, the days down toward the morning that would decide whether his second life had been worth anything at all.